Next bill on the calendar. Clerk will report the bill.
Senate File Number 2214, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to higher education, unofficially engrossed and reprinted for the House to include committee amendments.
Call upon the member from Otter Tail, Representative Nornes, to introduce his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sense a mood change. A good night's sleep has been really good for this place. And I hope I can continue that for the next 30 minutes. I also should add that I really enjoyed Mary Murphy's story of being in the Ferris wheel. I thought I could add my story of being on roller skates and the moonlight skate, how much fun that was. But yeah. All right, to the bill. First, I'd like to thank those that have helped my committee. Without them, it's really impossible, so we need good staff. CA is Kaylee. My LA is Megan, researcher is Lauren, and of course the other staff persons, the bipartisan staff that helped to make up the team. So we thank them very much for their help. The higher education bill can kind of be summed up in 3 words. The focus is on students, of course, but the 3 words are affordability, accountability, and accessibility. Those are the 3 themes we have worked on this session, all on behalf of our students. To begin with, the bill provides a tuition freeze and a 1% cut in the second year for Minnesota State colleges, the 2-year colleges, and a freeze in the second year at the Minnesota State 4-year institutions. It provides enough funding to the Minnesota State grant program to reduce family share by 10%, and allowing more grant money to help the high-need Minnesota students afford college. We have multiple loan forgiveness programs aimed at the high-need career areas in the state. That's the workforce area that we're looking at, ag educators, large animal veterinarians, and individuals who work in greater Minnesota. It also provides workforce development scholarships to incentivize students to go into high-need career opportunities that will help with Minnesota workforce shortages. The bill also helps to lower student costs by making student activity fees optional. Under accountability, the bill also makes sure that we keep our higher education institutions accountable. It encourages the bargaining units, for example, to negotiate within the budget that we allow here in the Minnesota legislature. It allows automatic acceptance for Minnesota students who graduate in the top 10% of their class. It provides additional funding to help with students and their loan debts through a counseling program to help students who are nearing default on their loans. This bill also creates accessibility to higher education for students who otherwise would not have these educational opportunities. There's a grant program for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities to help their families afford a higher education program. The bill also provides funding for scholarships and tuition relief to Minnesota Life College for students with autism and learning differences. It expands the BUILD program to Minnesota State and the University of Minnesota to provide higher education experience and certificates to students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Some of you may have had a chance to be in our committee, but most likely most of you were not. But some of these students came and testified in our committee. And it's just amazing to see how much this has helped them gain confidence. And I should add that Bethel University will have its first graduating class of the BUILD program this spring. This bill also appropriates money for the spinal cord research, provides funding to the University of Minnesota for their National Research Institute, MinDrive, and the Family Medicine Residency Program. This bill is a strong focus on making things better for students and workforce readiness by helping to make higher education more affordable, accountable, and accessible. The target for this, my committee, was just short of $150 million. And it breaks out with the Office of Higher Education at almost $34 million, Minnesota State $93,600,000, and the University of Minnesota $22,100, or $22,100,000. We've had a lot of good authors bring to the committee bills this year. And I'll just highlight, we have a bipartisan bill, I should point out. There's a provision on ag educators loan forgiveness from Representative Poppy, Representative Leon, a Greater Minnesota Loan Forgiveness Program. And there are 3 provisions in our bill representing bills presented by Representative Omar. I think that probably gives you an overview. We have, I think, 2 amendments, and perhaps this would be a time to deal with those.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hillstrom moves to amend Senate File Number 2214, the unofficial engrossment, and the amendment is coded A7.
I call upon the member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, you're receiving some documents that are being passed out. We had 2 private for-profit colleges here in Minnesota that the Attorney General sued, and the court found that they committed fraud. There was actually an adjudication that fraud was committed, and in fact, restitution has been ordered. Members, the fraud that was committed was by providing a program telling folks that they could sit for the law enforcement test, they could be law enforcement officers in Minnesota, when in fact the program did not meet the standards for the students, even if they graduated, to be able to sit for that test. It also told people that they could come in and get this degree and then they could be corrections officers, probation officers, when in fact you have to either have a 4-year degree, so their degree didn't count, or you didn't need a degree at all and a high school diploma was enough. The court found that in fact veterans on the GI Bill were some of the folks that were fraudulently recruited to come, and these programs had in many instances less than a 10% graduation rate. Minnesota law right now says that if you commit fraud and the court adjudicates you that you have committed fraud, that you are not allowed to keep your license to continue to be a school. In Representative Nornes' bill, he permits someone else to make the determination on whether or not the school should get to keep their license. Members, the irony of this is Representative Knobloch in his committee, in the Ways and Means Committee, said and added an amendment to this bill that if you have committed a gross misdemeanor or a felony, so if you hunted out a season, that's a gross misdemeanor. Hunting over bait, that's a gross misdemeanor. You shouldn't be able to automatically get into college. Yet this bill says if you commit fraud and the court finds that you committed fraud, and in this case, I think the article says over 1,200 students, school, it's okay, you should get to keep your license. I think that's wrong. Members, it will result in additional lawsuits. It sends the wrong message to Minnesotans when you say that a school that has been adjudicated guilty of fraud in Minnesota can continue to recruit students for a different program, can continue. Now, members, who did these folks target? Who did these private for-profits target? They targeted folks who could get a lot of financial aid, who might not be able to traditionally get into a regular traditional college. Who were they? Many of them were our veterans. So, members, I just simply want to remove the language that's in this bill allowing schools like that have been adjudicated guilty of fraud in this state. I want to keep them from getting their license back. And so that is what this amendment does. It simply deletes the language in the bill and keeps current law as it is. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a roll call on this amendment.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Dakota, Representative Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Representative Hillstrom, I'd just like to correct the record on a few things said during the course of debate. You said that this says these schools should get their license back. It doesn't say that. It only gives the Office of Higher Education discretion on deciding whether or not you should get your license back. Also, there's, all these handouts going around are about Globe University. This doesn't have anything to do with Globe University. It wouldn't do anything for Globe University. They cannot get their license back.
Representative Nornes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to speak against this amendment. I sense there are some people that do not like the for-profit schools in our state, and that's not the issue we're talking about here today, but this amendment really is very, very simple. If this were the language, not the amendment, but if the current language that's in the bill were to stay in the bill and we could reverse and go back in time, the Office of Higher Education would have a decision to make whether they want to proceed with closing down all of these campuses, disrupting all of these students' lives, unemploying all of those professors and teachers, and having empty buildings in these communities, or discipline if they want to discipline, but allow the program to continue with the exception of the one that was felt to be in default, or whatever term we want to use on it. But so it would have given them the discretion. That's all the bill does. It's not an absolute anymore. Again, we're only telling Office of Higher Education, you have a choice in what to do. And again, it does nothing to reverse what's been done. It does nothing to restore Globe or any of those. It's over. That part of it's over. We're just looking forward, and I believe that this amendment deserves a no vote.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to be clear, I know that this does not do anything to reverse at this moment for this case, but it says any school, it's private for-profit going forward, after a court has found them guilty, adjudicate them guilty of fraud, that the department gets to decide whether they should keep their license. Members, we pass bills in this legislature all the time, and in this bill there's a provision that says if you're guilty of a crime, you lose the right to do some things. In Health and Human Services, you see that if you've been guilty of certain kinds of thefts, you can't be a PCA. If you've been found guilty of any number of crimes, you're not allowed to be a guardian. We do all sorts of things to protect vulnerable people, and we do all sorts of consumer protection. That is our job. And what this provision does is says it's okay if you commit fraud on your students. We're just going to stop you from having that program where you've been found to have committed fraud. What makes you think that if they're willing to commit fraud in one or two areas, that they aren't willing to do that to someone else? And why is it okay that these veterans spent their GI Bill money, which they don't get back? The federal government doesn't get it back. You only get to use the GI Bill once. What makes you think it's okay to use government money for a fraudulent program and the person who defrauded both the government and the student, that it's okay and that they should get a second opportunity to defraud another set of folks? In this bill, again, we say students who are in the top 10% of their class, if you've committed a gross misdemeanor, and some gross misdemeanors are very serious, and there is, theft. This college in particular committed theft, fraud, of over 1,200 people. And you're saying, it's okay. Let's let the Department of Higher Education decide whether or not they should get to defraud some more. That's the message you're sending. And I think it's wrong. I think that when you, as a school, are found guilty by a court and you're ordered to pay restitution, you don't get a second chance. Please vote yes.
The member from Stearns, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, one of these institutions was in my area, and what strikes me as odd is when they found that they had a problem with that one course, they closed it. They stopped that course in 2014, but we closed the entire institution 2 years later. For the only violation was the course they closed. All those students, all the faculty, everyone was out the door and right. They were wrong, and they have to pay that back. But all those students and those veterans that were in the other programs got shut down too. My son was one of the ones in the ITT program, 6 months from getting a 4-year degree when the federal government leaned on them. Didn't get any of his GI Bill back. Credits didn't transfer. Very close to home. I have a bill that was trying to fix some of that. So it strikes me very close to home, but I don't believe that shutting down the entire institution for one violation is the right thing to do. Because it cascades over to many, many people when you do that. If they have a program that isn't right, shut the program down. Don't shut the entire institution down. Vote red.
Member from Dakota, Representative Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, members, I think we need to trust our students. I think we need to trust the Office of Higher Education, the regulators at the Office of Higher Education, to look at these cases. To look at these cases on a case-by-case basis. Not everything is the same. And to just stand up here and try to make a boogeyman out of the Globe situation, which is something this bill doesn't address. That's over. Globe cannot get their license back. We're just standing here making a boogeyman out of these private for-profit colleges, but this bill also applies to private nonprofit colleges. It's not just for-profit colleges. And there's all kinds of instances with the Office of Higher Education where they're going in and having investigations of not only for-profit colleges, but nonprofit private institutions where something in their literature was slightly misleading, or these regulations are extremely complex if anybody reads into them, and there can be small violations that happen at St. John's or Concordia or Gustavus or any of these well-known private nonprofit colleges. It's not just private for-profit colleges. Members, vote red on this amendment. We need to trust our students, and we need to set our students free.
Member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I think Representative Howe really focused in on the core issue, and that is what the language of the bill actually does is it provides the Office of Higher Education the ability to handle this situation as appropriate. And so if there's a program that's out of line, they have the ability to restrict just that program. But the idea that because one program is out of step or made a mistake, the idea that every other student and every other faculty member needs to be put out on the street. So we had a school in Elk River operating as well. And I had dozens and dozens of constituents that were in the veterinary assistant program and some of the other programs not at all related to the fraudulent activity that happened within the criminal justice program. They weren't impacted by that at all. They were happy with the school they were attending. They were happy with the education they were receiving. And they were told, tough luck, you're out, you're done, this whole school is over. And why? It's important to know why. because in state statute, we don't allow the Office of Higher Education, we cannot allow them to do anything rather than ignore the whole situation or close the entire school. And so what Representative Nornes, what Chair Nornes' bill does is say, if you can identify one problem area, it gives the Office of Higher Education the latitude, if it's appropriate, if the Office of Higher Education thinks it's appropriate, to say, you know what, that one area is out of line and we have to cancel that program. It gives them the ability to differentiate before just closing the entire school. I'll tell you what, I trust the Commissioner of Higher Education, I trust the Office of Higher Education to make that decision, to be able to discern between closing a program versus closing an entire school. I think the legislature ought to give the office that discretion.
The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have to rise in support of Representative Hillstrom's amendment, and I'm kind of bowled over at the defense I'm hearing of an organization that defrauded these students, left them with worthless education, left them with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. That is obscene. But let's dig further. They also defrauded the taxpayers of the United States of America because they targeted people who were eligible for GI Bill benefits. And they preyed on these people's hopes and dreams. I hope and dream to become a Minnesota State Trooper. We can help you do that. Hand over your GI Bill money to us that the taxpayers paid for. Oh, you've exhausted that benefit. Why don't you go get a secured loan that the taxpayers back up? Oh, you exhausted that benefit, and you're left with a worthless piece of paper and tens of thousands of debt. So not only do these folks get to continue to pay and pay and pay on those loans that they took out, but they've exhausted their GI benefit. So their hope of creating a better life for themselves after they served our country is completely taken away from them because this school knowingly and willingly chose to defraud them. And I don't care if it was just one program, and I don't care if it was just a few students. These guys preyed and victimized on veterans of the United States of America, and they did it and they made a profit using taxpayer money. They absolutely don't get a second chance. Support Representative Hillstrom's amendment. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, so I'm having a hard time with this here because we have so many provisions in law where somebody is convicted of a crime and there is what we call collateral consequences as a result of that conviction. We even have an example of this in the bill, as Representative Hillstrom said. Somebody convicted of a gross misdemeanor, a student doesn't get the benefit of this admission that other students get to Minnesota State and to the U. And we talk in other places, so in many other places that's true, and yet somehow when it comes to corporations, now we're going to be much more flexible, much more concerned. We're going to have much more faith in the commissioner and the departments and the agencies. When it comes to individuals who've done wrong, had a problem, violated society standards, oops, we're going to have an automatic concern for them. Automatically something kicks in. But now when it comes to a corporation, I guess we're going to change things. We're going to be much more flexible. Members, I just don't understand that at all. I would suggest certainly we need to have some flexibility in terms of consequences for individuals and for entities that have violated the law. In this case, this is real narrow. These aren't crimes in general. This is fraud, this is misrepresentation, and certainly by the same standards we apply to individuals, corporations that do that in educating students should not continue to educate students. Vote green.
Member from Otter Tail, Representative Nornes.
Well, thank you for the debate. I should point out again that and this is not about Globe now. You have to understand this is about moving forward. And But I'll just mention one more thing, that I think we closed somewhere between 6 and 9 campuses here in Minnesota. It didn't get much publicity, so that's a big deal. But it's not about Globe. This is moving forward. And it could happen to Concordia. It could happen to any other Bethel. It could happen to whatever college in town or in this state that's overseen by the Office of Higher Education. This could happen to them. So I think this is a very reasonable part of our bill. It gives some latitude, and I believe that it certainly deserves a red vote. Thank you.
Roll call being requested. The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 73 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Gruenhagen moves to amend Senate File number 2214, the unofficial engrossment, and the amendment is coded A17-0350.
I call upon the member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen, to your amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a similar amendment that we passed last biennium when I served on the Higher Ed Committee. And what it does, it simply encourages the U of M to continue to move in a direction of being at the average of the Big Ten tuition cost. There's actually 13 universities in the Big Ten now, and Minnesota, according to the analysis I have, is number 5 highest in terms of the tuition costs for resident students, those from Minnesota. In the non-resident area on the undergraduate program, we're number 12, or one of the lowest. There's one school lower than this. Now, the undergraduate tuition is higher than the resident tuition, but in relationship to the other universities, we are quite a bit lower. This simply encourages the university to continue to move in a direction of the median. In the past, and they have made progress on that. In the past, we were number 13 in the undergraduate non-resident program. And remember, the non-resident program is students from outstate, including foreign students. It also addresses the graduate program, where we have a very similar situation. And we're all aware of the student debt crisis that we face. And when I was on the Higher Ed Committee, and I want to thank Chair Nornes for his leadership on that, on the last biennium, I had the total number of non-resident students, and I calculated if we had moved to the median on the undergraduate tuition, you would not only be able to freeze the resident tuition, you could actually reduce it by over $1,000 a year if you applied the savings to the resident. So I think, members, I see improvement, but I think we continue to need to send a message to the university that we do expect our resident students to get the best bang for the dollar as far as their tuition. Now, on a positive note with the university, they did announce in a news release a land grant legacy scholarship starting this fall in 2017. And it's a program that's seeking private donations to encourage outstate students to attend the university. It would provide a $5,000 scholarship to outstate students each year for 4 years. So I applaud the university for taking that step. In that news release, the university acknowledged, we know that one of the key drivers of Greater Minnesota students' decision to study out of state is related to finances. North Dakota, Iowa, and South Dakota have lower tuition than the university. The new scholarship program will level the playing field financially and ensure that the University of Minnesota strong academic programs are even more affordable to Minnesota students and families. With that, members, I appreciate your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Winona, Representative Pawlowski.
Mr. Speaker, will Representative Gruenhagen yield to a question?
He will yield.
Representative Gruenhagen, can you explain why on line 1.5 you use the word encouraged, and then what happens if the university does not follow your encouragement?
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Pawlowski. It's a strongly worded letter, yeah. We cannot, my understanding is we cannot mandate. The University of Minnesota is autonomous, so the most we can do is encourage the university to address this situation. If you know of a way to mandate the situation, I'd be open for that discussion.
Representative Pawlowski.
Mr. Speaker and members, this is exactly the type of amendment we should not do on the House floor. This is an amendment that should be done in committee, so we understand the consequences of it. And so we also understand if we use a word like encouraged, it actually has some ability to do something. I don't necessarily disagree with what Representative Gruenhagen is trying to achieve, but it shouldn't be done on the House floor. It should be done when we have testimony from the university and from the public, and I would hope that we would not adopt the amendment.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Pawlowski. Yeah, the last time I offered this amendment, it also was on the House floor, and it passed overwhelmingly, if my recollection is correct. So, members, I'd encourage your support. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom. Further discussion to the amendment. Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A17-350 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion prevails. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2214.
Third reading. Member from Winona, Representative Pawlowski.
Mr. Speaker and members, I wish to speak to the bill. And I'm going to start by saying this. This is a bill that tries to do a great many things. Unfortunately, it does none of them well. This is a bill that addresses tuition. And if we look at the University of Minnesota alone, the highest priority the university had was to fund its core mission. This bill ignores the core mission, so there will be tuition increases for the undergraduates in both years of the next biennium. And these will also add to student debt. The interesting thing about what it does with Min-State, or what we used to call Min-Skew, is that it freezes tuition for the colleges, the two-year colleges, and then it lowers it by 1% the second year, and we would all agree that's a good thing. Now ask the question how they do it. For the four-year universities, there's a tuition increase the first year. That's probably at least 3%. Then it freezes it the second. This is what happened over the last cycle. And we now know how Minnesota State addressed that. In order to get the 1% cut the second year, they took it from the four-year universities and they moved it in their budgets. So what we saw over the last cycle of 2015 and 2016 was an interesting shift in how Minnesota State funded what really is an unfunded tuition freeze and what is a tuition increase. The other thing that we now have Min State admitting is that there is a funding imbalance in the Minnesota State system, and this bill alone would make it approximately $169 million. That is an incredible sum of money and would have a tremendous impact on all of the colleges and universities. The other issue that's here, and this is one of the biggest financial issues in the country, is student debt. There will be, as a result of this bill, an increase in student debt. There will be an increase in student debt at the university. There will be an increase in student debt in the Minnesota State system. Student debt now is higher nationally than credit card debt. We are 4th and 5th in the nation in the amount of debt students carry and the number of students that carry debt. And this is a result of really what happened during the recession when we cut higher education by record amounts to balance the budget, and then both systems, and I say both systems, the University of Minnesota and MnSCU decided that they could print money, and they printed it on the backs of the students with record tuition increases. These record tuition increases we partially paid back in 2013 and 2014, and there have been attempts over the last session, and there's an attempt here to do it also. However, we have not paid it back. There will still be record debt, and there will be tuition increases. And now there is another interesting phenomenon that's happening in Minnesota: declining enrollment. We see the declining enrollment across the Minnesota State system. We even see it in the University of Minnesota system. That declining enrollment is causing right now cuts in almost every one of the campuses, both the 2- and 4-year campuses of the Minnesota State system. Cuts to administration, cuts to faculty, and cuts to programming, cuts to support. That's happening now, before this bill is signed. You have on your desks a letter from Governor Dayton through the Office of Higher Ed. The governor has stated his position on the bill. He's also stated what's likely to happen because of some of the policy provisions in this bill. Those policy provisions are mandates, and they will be paid for by the college campuses. I wish the bill was better, but now, if it goes into conference committee, it goes into conference committee with a Senate bill that is at least $40 million less than this bill. And my assumption would be, and Representative Nornes can say it won't, the next number will be somewhere between the Senate and the House, which will mean something's going to have to be cut from what we're debating about today. This bill tries to do a great many things. It just doesn't do any of them very well.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, funding for higher ed is under attack across the entire country, and this bill is no different. It attacks higher ed by severely underfunding it in our state. 6 years ago, the University of Minnesota and MnSCU, Minnesota State, their biennium budget was cut by $450 million, and we have never recovered. They have never recovered from that cut. And this is not really an increase of the base of $22 million. This is a cut. And that is because we don't adjust our spending by inflation. And we don't have a surplus to spend on higher ed because we don't adjust our spending by inflation. Instead, the Republican priority has been to cut taxes by $1.4 billion. That cut, that increase in tax, that tax cut cuts funding for higher ed. So if we adjust for inflation, we're really cutting the university's budget by over $200 million. And we're not just underfunding the institutions, we're underfunding our students. And we're hurting their future, and we're hurting the future of our state, because higher ed is the engine for economic growth. We're starving the institutions, we're underfunding our students, we're depriving our students, and we're depriving them of an opportunity to succeed. We're depriving our employers from skilled labor. We're depriving our state from being able to compete globally and nationally. This is going to slow our economy, because when students have to pay more in tuition, they take on more debt. It delays their spending, buying a house, getting married, buying household goods, buying a car. Your bills have severe consequences, and this consequence of this bill is going to hurt the entire state by underfunding our institutions and our future, underfunding our students to get the opportunity to succeed and contribute to our economy. So I encourage you to send this back to committee and increase the funding for the University of Minnesota and for Min State, to increase that target. And that target was set by the Republicans. So when students come to me and complain about higher tuition, when employers complain about not being able to get skilled labor, I'm going to point the finger at my Republican colleagues, because this is your bill. You own this bill. This is not the governor's proposal. This is not the DFL proposal. This is the Republican proposal. Last semester, I had a student in my office who was living in his car because he could not afford to pay for rent, could not afford to stay in the dorms. But he knew how important it was to get a higher education degree. He knew that he would need to finish to get out of poverty, to succeed. So many of my students work close to full-time and are full-time students. It delays their graduation. It delays their ability to get a job. It's a huge opportunity cost for them to graduate in over 4 years, if it takes them 5 or 6 years. So I encourage you to vote no on this bill and improve it. Thank you.
The member from Clay, Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And Representative Pawlowski, I appreciate your comments and walking through this bill and really laying out what this bill does and what this bill is all about. And Representative Schultz, what this is going to mean for students and people my age, my generation, and their consumption power, their consumer power. Members, this bill does underfund higher education. There's no other way around that. And at a time when we have a very healthy surplus, a very healthy economy, we need to do everything that we can to get adequate funding into higher education. On top of that, right now in the state of Minnesota, 75% of the jobs in the state require some form of post-secondary education. And last session, when I was a member of the Greater Minnesota Jobs Policy Committee, we took a couple tours around the state visiting businesses, and the concern that we heard over and over again, you hear it from manufacturers. The Enterprise Minnesota, they put out a survey of manufacturers. What's one of their top concerns? Number one concern, that we don't have workers who have the right skills, have the right qualifications to take on these jobs. Members, higher education is about the future of our state's economy, and I would say even more than that, it's about the future, or rather the ability for people to empower themselves, the ability for people to take the future into their hands. And so, like I say, this is about the future of Minnesota's economy and really about the future of Minnesota's workforce. Members, we need a better bill for higher education. We need a better funding bill for higher education. Thank you.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm glad that I get to speak before Representative Carlson does today. because I'm going to do a history lesson. And so he can probably abridge his history lesson based on what I'm going to tell you about. So about 30 years ago, I worked in state government. I worked in the Department of Administration. I was a management analyst. And one of my assignments was to staff a commission. And the commission was chaired by former Republican Governor Elmer L. Anderson. Spelled S-E-N, by the way. That was something I had to know because I did the minutes for these meetings. And at that point in history, Rudy Perpich was the governor, and he appointed a bipartisan committee. Because what was happening in this state and in this country at that time was that the baby boomers had worked their way through the education system. And actually, my age was the baby, kind of the tail end of the baby boomers. And I know that my younger sister was on the cliff. There were no children born. I mean, there were children born, but very, very few children. And the demographic shift at that period in time was really significant. And those of us that are in this generation, we know that because we lived it. And the rest of you are learning it as recent history. Recent history, but history. So they formed this commission because we had all of these great post-secondary educational institutions across the state. We had them in every region of the state. And at that time, there were technical colleges, and there were community colleges, and there were state colleges. I think there were state colleges, not universities at that time. And what people were saying is, we can't afford it. We can't afford to give this access to education across our state. We can't afford it anymore. We're going to have to shut campuses down. But Rudy Perpich was an optimist, and he found Elmer L. Anderson, who was an optimist. Elmer Anderson, people that had the opportunity to know him, he was someone that everybody really could connect to. And in fact, the commission was called The Future of Post-Secondary Education. Elmer Anderson called it FOPSI. That was the nickname he had for it, because it just fit his personality and it fit his commission. So the commission did its work. What they said is we need to find ways to save money. And they started the mergers between the systems. The community colleges and the technical colleges was the first merger. And then that continued on. But what he said, and the most important part of it was, and actually one of the things that we looked at too was going on in Rochester right now, this idea of the medical center in Rochester and the education that's in Rochester right now. That was something that Elmer L. Anderson was involved with that commission, and he kind of laid the groundwork for that happening. But the main thing that came out of this was he said, we are not, and the commission said, we are not closing down these campuses. We are thinking of our future, and we are planning for our future. And what we can do is we'll leave these campuses open. We will provide quality education at all of these campuses. And we'll do it because more people will go to college. And he put out that dream by maintaining access, maintaining quality. The commission guaranteed that more young people were going to be able to go to college. And that's where you see Minnesota became, or continued to be, and was on that leadership edge of an educated state. Now, I don't know how we got here, but apparently we're there again, where people are thinking education, post-secondary education, higher education, is someplace where we can start cutting money. And that we don't have to fund that anymore. It's not, maybe I got my college education, so I don't care about the people that are coming after me. And I know that if Elmer L. Anderson were still here, if Rudy Perpich were still here, they would say, nope, not in our state, not in Minnesota. So, it's the same story. We care about I think my constituents, I think your constituents care about higher ed, post-secondary education. I think they know that this bill that we're looking at today underfunds it. And I don't think that they want to see us do. So I'm going to be voting no.
The member from Dakota, Representative Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, This is a good bill. This is a bill that puts students first by making sure college is more affordable, more accessible, and more accountable. It keeps college affordable by reducing tuition at two-year schools in Minnesota State and freezing tuition in the second year of the biennium at four-year schools. And this is an important approach to keep college, the cost of college, under control for students. It keeps schools, public schools in Minnesota accountable by making sure that student fees are under control. This makes these student service fees, going to clubs, going to these extracurricular activities optional in the bill. And that's a strong reform that we heard from students that they need to find ways to save money, and students that are pinching their pennies and working hard to make their way through college. This is real money, this is big money to them, and it makes college more affordable, and it keeps the colleges accountable, that their student fees are reasonable, and improves accessibility so that students with special needs can attend college and have an educational future in that way. There's been talk on the floor that $149.5 million is a cut in higher education. At Prior Lake High School, a $149.5 million increase was not a cut in higher education. It was a large investment, and I'm proud of this bill. It puts students first. Members, vote green.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson L.
Mr. Speaker, members, I actually planned on speaking before I was referenced a few moments ago, but it did prompt something a little different that I'm going to say before I get into what I was going to comment on, and that was the reference to the Elmer L. Anderson Commission. I actually testified before it years ago, but one of the recommendations that came out of there dealt actually with the amendment that was just put on earlier about out-of-state students and what they should be charged. And Elmer Anderson was a strong advocate of lowering out-of-state tuition, in fact, charging them the same rates. His argument was that you could attract the best and the brightest, and there was a lot of information about a large percentage of them would stay in Minnesota, and they would be job creators and provide professional services and any number of things by attracting some of these students from out of state. But that's an aside. That amendment went on. It's a request, I guess, of the university to review that. What I really wanted to talk about, though, is that a number of years ago, about that same period of time, of what we call the Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Higher Education Services Office, it's had different names, received a grant from the Ford Foundation. And there was a study group that I happened to serve on at the time, made up of a variety of citizens, on the funding of higher education. And out of that came a recommendation that the students be responsible for roughly 1/3 of the cost of instruction, and the state responsible for 2/3. And that was a formula that we operated with for a number of years. In fact, that formula is still technically in state law, although it's been slightly modified. The reason I point that out is that tuition has flipped. And you heard the numbers from Representative Pawlowski and others about what happened to higher education in recent years. And what's happened is that as I look around the room, probably the vast majority of us, with the exception of some of our younger members, probably went to a college or a university, if you went to a public one in Minnesota, under that formula. And you could graduate debt-free, and also a part of the recommendations was to deal with financial aid. So if you were low income, we backfilled the Pell Grants and greatly enhanced the state grant program. So during that period of time, we covered both the low-income students through the grant program. We put in place the 1/3, 2/3 formula that lasted for many, many years so that Minnesotans could graduate from a college or a university, like I say, virtually debt-free. Well, that's all changed. Well, when we were in Ways and Means, and I want to give Representative Pawlowski credit for this because he moved an amendment in Ways and Means to provide better funding when these targets are set for higher education. And unfortunately, that was voted down on a straight party line vote. Some of the arguments that we're making here on the floor today from a variety of people, mainly on our side of the aisle, reinforce the need for that better investment in higher education. And you heard me the other day with the K-12 bill when I said one of the most important, in fact, I would say the most important investment the state of Minnesota can make is in education, whether we're talking early ed through grade 12 or we're talking about our colleges and universities, four-year degrees, or graduate school or professional schools. That truly is our strongest investment when we talk about the future of the state of Minnesota. And unfortunately, this bill, quite frankly, does not measure up. And as someone said earlier, this bill really should be defeated, sent back to Ways and Means, and the funding should be restructured so that we're doing a better job of treating our students and investing in our great state of Minnesota. Thank you.
The member from Cass, Representative Poston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to talk specifically about the University of Minnesota for a minute. I kept hearing that they were being underfunded, and I kept hearing that they were going to have tuition increases. So I asked them to provide a little bit of financial information about the university, and I'd like to share a little bit of that with you. The first report that they gave me is a pool of cash and investments that they have on hand. And you'd be surprised probably to know that that investment fund has $1,052 million in it, and it has doubled in size over the last 10 years. They also provided me with their regular operating balance sheet that shows that they have $1 billion in reserves. They also gave me their endowment balance, and this was shocking to me. Their endowment has $3,394 million in it. So I think we may be underfunding their ask, but I think that our university is financially in very, very good shape, and tuitions for in-state students should probably be going down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Nicollet, Representative Johnson C.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. We're in the budget process right now, and it's a good reminder, this bill is a reminder that budgets are about choices, and those choices reflect our values. And that in what we're seeing today is really the impact of the Republican leadership and the choices that are being made in these last couple of weeks. I think we're seeing directly the impact of an oversized tax cut and the impact of a policy decision to make road funding compete with education for funding. And frankly, I think our students are losers in the competition. I worked for 30 years as a student advisor at Minnesota State University Mankato. And I saw budgets come up and down and go up and down. And what I really saw, though, in my office was the impact on the students. I could spend the next day or two telling you stories about students who chose to stop out for a quarter or two to gain some money so they could afford to come back. I saw students just talking about, how am I going to deal with this $40,000 debt that I've accrued? I could go on and on. I think we know there's an impact on students when we don't fund education, and this bill is not adequately funding education. To what degree? When compared to the governor's recommendation, the House bill has 37% less investment in students attending the Minnesota State colleges and universities, 75% less investment in students and research for the University of Minnesota, and 58% less in need-based aid for low and middle-income students who attend colleges across Minnesota. Our students will feel the impact of this it will result in greater student debt. Students aren't the only losers, I would argue. I think rural economic development is a loser in this process. About 3 days into my first term here, representatives from Greater Mankato Growth came to visit me. That's our local Chamber of Commerce. And when they talked to me, they said, well, you know, our membership has determined that by far and away, the #1 need we have in the Greater Mankato area is better talent, a better talented workforce. You know what? They still say the same thing. They also acknowledge that to get that talent, we need to invest, and it's not cheap, but we need to invest in K-12 education, and we need to invest in higher education. We absolutely need talent across rural Minnesota. This bill will not make up for the measures that we need to overcome that deficit, to make sure our employers have access to that talent. From the other side, from the side of the worker, from the people of rural Minnesota, we need higher wage jobs. Our problem is sometimes just we need jobs, but actually where I live, it's more of a case we need higher wage jobs. And those jobs in the higher wage sectors, such as advanced manufacturing, such as healthcare, need talented people. And we make that investment in people to provide that access to those high wage jobs through our investments in public higher education. And this bill, again, falls short of that. I represent a district in southern Minnesota. I grew up in the Red River Valley. There's no doubt in my mind that agriculture is an absolutely crucial industry to this state. And agriculture also needs investment to prosper. And again, this bill falls short. I think about the meager amount of money going to the University of Minnesota. When I think of the University of Minnesota, my mind runs over the St. Paul campus. And my mind runs over the St. Paul campus because when I talk to farmers in my district, they depend on that campus. They depend on the work of that campus to be successful farmers. That's a symbiotic relationship that's really important to family farmers in rural Minnesota. And yet we're not choosing to just give a meager increase to the University of Minnesota. I think our ag economy will feel that. I also see it at home. Whereas South Central College is in my district, but there's other community colleges that have ag education programs that are preparing people to work in the agricultural industry. They will be squeezed. There's just not enough money here. It's kind of like it was back in the days when we have deficits. But what's surprising here is during a surplus, we're going to be squeezing these institutions, squeezing our students. Students are losing. Rural economic development is losing because of this lack of effort. And frankly, I think the real loser is Minnesota's future.
Member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's my first time on the Higher Education Committee, and it was an honor to serve with Chair Nornes, and I'm very proud of this bill. As was mentioned earlier, this bill does include a tuition reduction for our two-year schools. It includes a tuition freeze for the second year of the biennium for our four-year schools. The bill has a historic increase in the state grant. If you look at the increase in the state grant, that will cause the family share to drop by 10%. That is an impact for Minnesota families that are going to be sending their children to college, and that's included in this bill. Members, what I want to talk about mainly is a bill that I had the honor of carrying today, both through the Higher Education Committee and also in HHS, and that's a bill that a group of Concordia University St. Paul students brought to me as a project they were working on for one of their government classes. And what this group of students did isn't just go around the Capitol for a little while and try to make a bill become a law. What they did is they identified a real issue that Minnesota is fundamentally lacking in, and that is how we are doing the most we can do to have young adults with autism live their life to the fullest. And what these group of Concordia St. Paul students did is they found out about a program here in the state of Minnesota called Minnesota Life College that partners with and serves young men and women with autism after they age out of high school. And it is a program that teaches life skills and independent skills for these young adults. And what's amazing is the work that this group of Concordia University St. Paul students did in going to MLC, meeting with staff, administrators, and students, finding out about the program, and then bringing that message and sharing that program here at the university. I'm proud that this program is being funded in Chair Nornes' bill. I'm proud that we as a state are committing to higher education opportunities for students, that a traditional collegiate path is just not in the cards for them, but that Minnesota as a state deserves the opportunity for all young men and women to have an opportunity to get the most out of a post-secondary career, and that's what MLC does. And I think our support financially of MLC within this bill proves our commitment not only to men and women dealing with autism in the state of Minnesota, but men and women that are dealing with acquiring the skills to live independently and thrive as they prepare to enter adulthood. I couldn't be more proud of this bill and what it contains. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Haley.
Thank you, Speaker and members. I also served on the Higher Ed Committee, and I am proud of this bill. Does it have everything? No. But I think we need to recognize it is about choices, and in higher ed, just as in HHS, you're choosing often between 2 and 3 good things, not a good thing and a bad thing. So we do have to make choices. That's just life, and that's part of our job as legislators. I'd like to point out a couple things. First of all, there are things in this bill to help students, $26 million in the state grant program, as Representative Zerwas said, and we also reduced the assigned family responsibility. There's also things in here to help students with debt. There's a student loan counseling service that we added, $400,000 going to that program. And another representative talked about ag. Do we support our farm economy? There's an agriculture educators loan forgiveness program. We know we need more educators in that field, and we're putting money there. There's a large animal veterinarian loan forgiveness program. We know that that's needed in rural Minnesota, and we're putting money there. We also do very, very much care about linking education and industry. It's a phrase I use often. I'm very passionate about the subject. There's very innovative things in this bill, but I would call out one. It's a workforce development scholarship program. We are putting in $2.5 million to get students incentivized to get into high demand fields. So we do care, and we are addressing the needs of our industry and our businesses. Students can get scholarships in advanced manufacturing, in agriculture, in healthcare services, and information technology. So members, I encourage you to look at the choices we made and look at the things that are very positive in this bill, and I encourage a yes vote.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. It's been a while since I've served on the Higher Ed Committee. I first served on that committee with Chair Rukavina, and Chair Rukavina often bemoaned the fact that he couldn't put more money into these institutions so that they could help students avoid the debt. And we heard testimonies from lots of students who, as Representative Johnson was describing, struggled with staying in these institutions. Former Chair Rukavina reminded me that the state of Minnesota used to have a commitment to helping students get a college education. And that came from the belief that it was an investment in our future, not just those students' future. And he brought up the example of the GI Bill and how much our economy grew when we made an investment in veterans returning from the war and making sure that they got those higher education degrees and turned that around into a strong economic engine. And as we've heard others say, we are missing that kind of thinking in our thinking about how we prepare for the future, how we invest in our state and invest in our workforce. we kind of lost that commitment, that idea that we're really investing in something that's going to pay us back in a big way. And I mention that because I remember when we started our committee, just as Representative Pulowski did in his committee when he was in charge, went through the budget. We learned what the costs and the expenditures were and studied that and realized that maybe there were areas where we needed to redirect them and have them consider doing different things, but we needed to make sure that we help them bring down the cost of tuition for students, because that's what ultimately really mattered. So it's a reflection, too, of the way our thinking, our philosophies have changed, I guess, those who are in charge of government. And I'm very thankful that Governor Dayton went against the grain, perhaps you could say, and raised revenue so that Chair Pulowski would have the money to invest in higher education and bring down tuition in a way that didn't hurt the schools and didn't hurt students. So I'm really proud of that effort. I hope that in some way we can recapture that vision of how government actually can do positive things, can help people if we invest in it and guide it in its way. So I just offer that as another way of looking at this problem. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy E.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker and members. I wanted to just talk a little bit about student debt. I sent an article around. I didn't copy it, but just sent it to you in your email about a student debt servicer called Navient. They are a company, a for-profit company, I understand, that helps students with their student debt and offloading that. They have been working for a number of years to help students with that, and their public relations talk a lot about their intention to help their many, many students manage their debt, but they're also in court. And in court, they're telling a very different story about their efforts to make sure that the students who have loans are paying them up and how they're stretching them into further debt, being able, in order to protect their bottom line. So I sent you the article. It was a disturbing article. It was just printed on the 3rd of April. And it calls into question, I think, the effort that we're putting forth on behalf of our students. And I know that there is a grant program in here. Representative Haley just spoke to it, which is intended to help students with their debt. And I think that's a nice start to extend that pilot that started last year. But when I listen to the members here over and over talking about the amount of debt that we know students in Minnesota have incurred, what they're carrying forward, what that means for our economy, I wish we were doing more. I wish we were being more novel. I wish we had taken up the idea that I introduced in a bill to create an ombudsperson. I wish we could have heard that bill in committee, Representative Nornes, and maybe we can next year. For all the reasons that members have spoken today about the importance of tackling the issue of debt, especially for the students who went to college like mine did during the recession, we need to be more aggressive on this front. I think we are missing that in this bill. I wish it were there. Thank you.
The Minority Leader, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, every Minnesotan deserves the opportunity to get a higher education without being saddled by years of student debt. But instead of upholding that commitment to our students, this bill today underfunds higher education, and Republicans instead have chosen to let tuition skyrocket and put too much money into the tax bill. We can do better. The cost of college is causing too many Minnesotans to delay buying a house, buying a car, or starting a family, because dealing with the cost of a mortgage and child care and a car payment and student debt is just too much. In Minnesota, our college costs have risen to make us the 5th highest in the country. And this happened through bills like this, underfunding higher education and shifting more and more of the cost to students. Last week, Republicans supported tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. And today, as a result of that decision, can't find enough resources to make higher education more affordable for students in Minnesota. Members, we can do better.
We should be investing in our higher education institutions, and I encourage you to vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Majority Leader Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Chair Nornes for putting together a great bill that emphasizes affordability, accountability, and accessibility. We just heard from the Minority Leader, but on affordability, this bill puts a tuition freeze in place at two-year Minnesota State colleges in 2017 and 18, and it reduces it by 1% in 2018 and 19. And it provides a tuition freeze for the 18-19 academic year at four-year universities. And I would just say we've heard a few people talk about the University of Minnesota and what they're doing with tuition, and I just want to point out that the University of Minnesota has indicated that regardless of how much we fund them, if we fund them at their full request, it is still their intention to raise tuition costs. That's right. You can talk about lowering the cost of tuition, but the University of Minnesota has told us that they fully intend to raise tuition regardless of what you do. And as you know, as a land-grant institution, we don't have the ability to prevent that from happening. The bill overall puts about $150 million new dollars into education, to higher education, and it also deals with accountability and accessibility issues. Members, this is a great bill. Thank you, Chair Nornes and committee members. Members, I encourage a green vote.
The member from Otter Tail, Representative Nornes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to members for spirited debate. I think our 30 minutes is up. I switched my watch to the other arm just to be different today. Didn't seem to matter, didn't make any difference. But anyway, I would like to again thank you for the debate. I've heard a lot about tuition increases and all that sort of thing. I'm not sure how that works. This will be the 6th year in a row for a freeze for the two-year schools. If this passes today, we'll have 6 years of flat tuition for our two-year schools in the state of Minnesota, with a decrease this current year and a decrease in the next 2 years. I mean, how do you figure I don't know how that figures when you say an increase in tuition. University, that's a different issue. But at the state colleges right here in Minnesota, I'm very proud to say that we have really done a lot to bend the curve and flatten that tuition for now it'll be 6 years. So I'm proud of that, and I think most of us are. I know it puts pressure on the system, but it makes us more efficient, and I think it makes us better as we do that. We've also added more money to the state grant program, and that offsets some of that tuition increases that we've seen. And so for the students, I think that we're doing the best we can with what we have to deal with. So again, I thank you for the debate. I also thank you for voting green. Thank you very much.
Clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 77 ayes and 53 nays, the bill is agreed to as amended and its title passed. Reports from committees on rules and legislative administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Thursday, April 6, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. Senate file numbers 605 and 1937.
Representative Hoppe. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions on the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Announcements. Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to a privilege of the House.
State your privilege.
Mr. Speaker, we are privileged to represent the people of our districts and the people of Minnesota. We are privileged to do so in this beautiful, newly renovated building. $300 million gets you a lot. It's fantastic. Part of what's really nice about this building is everything about it is splendid, but when we look at the building, we're also looking at the grounds of the building. And I rise to the privilege of the House to pay tribute to one of the people that worked to keep these grounds so great, who unfortunately passed away while working on those grounds one day last week. Most of you probably didn't know Charlie Doubles. He was a retired farmer from Farmington, came to work at the Capitol. He was, as people said, he was the nicest guy in the world. He could fix anything, he could grow anything, and he had a lot of pride in working here for the people of the state, for all of us, and keeping these Capitol grounds looking so fantastic. So as we go through our daily lives and we have the debates and where Republicans and Democrats are on this side of the aisle and that side of the aisle, I think it always behooves us to pay attention to the people that we don't always say thank you to and the people that we don't always appreciate when they're making this building and these grounds look so great. So, Mr. Speaker and members, I would appreciate it if we could all rise and join me in a moment of silence to Mr. Charlie Doubles.
Announcements. Representative Knobloch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Ways and Means Committee will meet at 5 o'clock in room 200 to take up the Omnibus Health and Human Services Bill. Republican members of the Ways and Means Committee will meet immediately after session in room 454.
Representative Carlson.
Follow-up announcement, as is usual, to Representative Knobloch. The DFL members will meet in room 272 immediately to discuss the Health and Human Services Bill.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, last night, after our spirited debate on the public safety bill, I forgot to remind everybody, April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. So I hope that everybody will take a few moments and reflect on the fact that in Minnesota, 8,000 injuries, 74 deaths last year, and nationally over 431,000 drivers were injured due to distracted driving. So tonight when you drive home, keep both hands on the wheel and both eyes on the road. Thank you.
Further announcements. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 5th, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 5th, 2017.